You've heard all about highest points from me on this channel. My US high points video is literally the high point of my channel. But today it's time to reach a low point, or rather 50 low points. The lowest points of all 50 US states. I've been working on this video for the last month and I'm so excited for you all to see it, so please do make sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. So with that, let's begin. Unlike the highest points of the US, many of which are famous mountain peaks or famous roadside attractions, many of the lowest points are mostly unknown and rarely visited, at least not intentionally. But if you have been to any of these low points, make sure to leave a comment down below, and chances are you have been to at least one, since 21 states all happen to share the same low point, the ocean. Here, the elevation is just sea level, of course. So let's quickly run through all of the state low points that are just Atlantic or Pacific coast, and then we'll get to the more interesting landlocked states. Pacific states first, here we have Alaska and Hawaii, plus Oregon and Washington. California is notably excluded from this group, but we'll get to that later. And then the Atlantic states, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, Georgia, and then Florida, which takes us to the Gulf of Mexico gang alongside Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas. And hey, Louisiana was left out. I wonder what's up with that. So that'll do it for the ocean low point states, and now let's go in elevation order from highest to lowest for the other 29. Perhaps coming at no surprise is Colorado, the state with the highest low point. Measured at about 3,315 feet above sea level, or just barely a kilometer, this low point is located right where the Arickaree River crosses into Kansas. It's located on private land, and despite its relatively uninteresting locale, there's a fascinating story from Colorado Public Radio about how the landowner discovered it was on her property, which I'll link in the description. By the way, Colorado's low point is higher than the highest points of 18 states. Pretty incredible. Wyoming's lowest point is next in line at 3,101 feet. This one is very similar to Colorado's in that it's a river at the east edge of the state, the Belle Fourche River on the South Dakota border. And if you're starting to think this kind of low point is a trend, you would be right. Anyway, Wyoming's low point is right at the edge of the Black Hills, which funnily enough are home to South Dakota's highest point. New Mexico spices things up a bit with a reservoir low point, Red Bluff Reservoir on the Texas border. But really, this is the Pecos River in disguise, so same old same old. At about 2,842 feet above sea level, this is down in the southeast corner of the state. And this lowest point is also intriguingly close to the highest point in Texas, which is only about 50 miles west. Up on the Utah-Arizona border is Utah's lowest point, measuring just about 2,000 feet above sea level at Beaver Dam Wash. This is a seasonal stream that only flows during periods of rain, so when it's dry, you could stand right in the riverbed on the border. It's also less than 3 miles away from the tri-point with Nevada, so that's fun. But good luck trekking through the desert to visit this area. Montana keeps us out west with its low point, located along the Kootenai River where it crosses into Idaho. At 1,800 feet above sea level, it's surrounded by mountains 3 times as high, although the dense tree cover along the river obscures that juxtaposition a bit. This is definitely the most accessible low point of the non-ocean states so far, since it's right off US Highway 2. South Dakota kicks off the Midwest with its lowest point being on the Minnesota border at Big Stone Lake. This is also the first low point under 1,000 feet at 966. Now this one is unique so far in that the lake itself forms the border, so just about anywhere along the lake on the South Dakota side could count as the low point. Although this definitely very official and legitimate Google Maps POI is in Big Stone City, so do with that info what you will. Heading a bit south, we find Nebraska's low point at about 840 feet in elevation. It's along the Missouri River where it leaves the state to form the Kansas-Missouri border, which just so happens to be at the tri-point of the 3 states and the easternmost point of Nebraska. So this is a must-visit spot for geography superlative tourists, but don't forget your kayak if you want to truly hit the tri-point. North Dakota takes us up to the Canadian border with its lowest point. At roughly 750 feet above sea level, this is found right where the Red River flows north into the province of Manitoba. And hey, there's an international subdivision tri-point right there with Minnesota too. Although trying to visit either of these things might get the attention of the nearby border crossing officers. Idaho finally brings us a new type of low point, the confluence of 2 rivers. Where the Clearwater River meets the Snake River at the Washington border is Idaho's low point at 710 feet above sea level. The twin cities of Lewiston, Idaho and Clarkston, Washington are found here. On the Lewiston, Idaho side is where you'll find the farthest inland port that's connected to the Pacific Ocean, and the relatively low elevation helps to illustrate how that's possible. Back in the plains is the lowest point in Kansas. Roughly 679 feet above sea level, it's at the Verdigris River along the Oklahoma state line. This is just outside Coffeyville in the southeast part of the state. It's a nice enough river, but unfortunately the Kansas being ultra-flat stereotype holds up here. It'd be pretty hard to pick this out as the lowest point from its surroundings. Very pleasant here though. The next few high points take us to the Great Lakes Basin, where the 5 famous lakes sit relatively low in elevation and as such form a vast drainage area. First up is Minnesota, with its Lake Superior shoreline measuring 601 feet above sea level. This is contrasted beautifully with the nearby Sawtooth Mountains and the Misquah Hills a bit further north, which contain Eagle Mountain, the highest point in the state. Wisconsin's lowest point is along its extensive Lake Michigan waterfront, measuring about 579 feet above sea level. Speaking from experience, it's well worth a visit to this part of the state. From Milwaukee's lakefront to the cliffs of Door County, there's so much to do and see along this huge shoreline of a low point. Speaking of Michigan, the state of Michigan ends this lovely Great Lakes detour. The state is almost entirely surrounded by the lakes, but it's on the smallest shoreline of Lake Erie where you'll find the lowest elevation in the state of 571 feet. A lot of the waterfront here is suburbanized or industrialized land, but you can still find some pleasant natural areas like Point Mouillet. And now it's right back to river-on-state border low points with Iowa, where the lowest elevation is 480 feet, where the Des Moines River meets the Mississippi. The Des Moines River is what forms that little tail section of Iowa in the southeast, and so the low point is also at the tri-point with Missouri and Illinois. Sadly, it's not quite the southernmost point in Iowa, as this little piece of land to the west takes that title. Back out west, Nevada is next up. Just barely beating Iowa at 479 feet in elevation, this low point is found along the Colorado River where it leaves Nevada. Like several low points we've seen so far, it's located at a tri-point of 3 states and is also the southernmost point of Nevada. And it's only perfectly on brand for Nevada that both a casino and a golf course are right there. Midwestern states again with Ohio, and you'll never guess what kind of low point it has. Of course, another river at another tri-point of states. Here in the southwesternmost corner of Ohio, the elevation dips down to 455 feet along the Ohio River next to Indiana and Kentucky. There's a big power plant next to this site, so you might run into some trouble trying to get to the riverfront. We don't have to go too far for Indiana's low point, which is downstream the Ohio River where the Wabash River meets it. And my goodness, you would never believe it, it's another tri-point. What is interesting is the over 100-foot difference in elevation compared to Ohio's low point. We're down to just 320 feet now. You can really get a sense of how close to sea level we're getting with this immensely flat and swampy landscape. Honestly, I was a bit surprised to see Oklahoma this far down the list at 289 feet. The low point is intriguingly close to the Ouachita Mountains, which, to be fair, don't reach staggering heights, but the contrast is interesting. Anyway, the lowest point is where the Little River crosses into Arkansas, part of a low-lying system of rivers all making their way to the Mississippi. Speaking of the Mississippi, my home state of Illinois takes us back to that river. About as far away from my Chicago home as you can get is the lowest point of 279 feet, where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi. There's a lot of cool history down here. The city of Cairo, a shell of its mighty river shipping past, and Fort Defiance State Park, a once important military installation where you can stand right at the river confluence. Kentucky's low point is in a fascinating part of the state called the Kentucky Bend. Along the Mississippi River here, the elevation is about 257 feet, and you'll notice that this little piece of land is actually an exclave of the state, which is formed by the straight line border with Tennessee and the winding course of the river. This unusual quirk of geography is only home to 9 people. I wonder how many of them know they live at the lowest point of the state. West Virginia's lowest point is found right next to another cool historic area, Harper's Ferry. The low point is about 240 feet above sea level just east of the town, at the Potomac River on the Virginia border. So yeah, the area's famous for its role in Civil War era history, but I don't think anyone would disagree that it's far more interesting to visit a random pile of rocks off the highway. Plus the tri-point with Maryland and Virginia is right there. What more could you want? The lowest point in Missouri takes us to another oddity of state border geography, the Missouri Boot Heel. The low point is at the Arkansas state line on the St. Francis River, which makes up the Boot Heel's west side, and the elevation here is about 230 feet. This flat and low-lying Missourian protrusion is more culturally and geographically similar to the Delta region of Arkansas and Mississippi than the rest of Missouri. Sticking in this area, we head down to Tennessee's lowest point, which is found along the Mississippi River where it borders, well, Mississippi. At about 178 feet above sea level, it's just outside the city of Memphis, and if you decide to trek through the woods to get there, you'll find yourself among Cow Islands 47 and 48, apparently. Don't know about you, but I'm booking my trip as we speak. We are dipping below 100 feet now as we head up to Vermont, where the lowest point is on Lake Champlain at only 95 feet above sea level. This low elevation is a result of its connection to the nearby St. Lawrence River, a historically important shipping route that drains the entire Great Lakes system into the Atlantic Ocean. Arizona is the only state with a low point on the Mexican border. At just 70 feet above sea level, this is found where the Colorado River flows into Sonora. If you visit, you'll find yourself among an irrigation-fueled agricultural area, and the Colorado riverbed is often bone dry these days. But of course, with its international border locale, the choice to stand at the true low point will come at the price of angry Border Patrol agents. And Arkansas has the lowest low point that's still above sea level. On the Louisiana border along the Ouachita River, the elevation dips down to only 55 feet. At this part of the river's course, it's surrounded by vast woods and wetlands, and 2 national wildlife refuges surround the river on either side of the border. So with that, we have made it down to sea level, so here are all the sea level states once again, which we touched on at the start of the video. Now, you might be wondering what happened with Pennsylvania, so let me explain that now. The lowest point in Pennsylvania is also at sea level, but this elevation doesn't take place at the open ocean, but instead along the Delaware River in Delaware County. The water is tidal here, and soon after leaving the state, it widens into an open inlet of the ocean. This ocean connection is just one of the reasons why Philadelphia became a major port city, especially during colonial times. If you've been paying close attention, you know we have just 2 states left, both of which have low points below sea level. First is Louisiana, which of course is the state where the Mississippi River finally empties into the Gulf of Mexico. The city of New Orleans, which is located in the river's delta, is the lowest point in the state, with parts of the city reaching 8 feet below sea level. New Orleans was first settled on the naturally above sea level land on the banks of the river, but low-lying land closer to Lake Pontchartrain was eventually drained and developed. The low elevation here leaves the city extremely prone to flooding, with Hurricane Katrina as an infamous and tragic example. You can really get a sense for how vulnerable the city is by looking at the levees that hold back the water surrounding it. And at last, the lowest point of the entire country is in California, in its famous Death Valley National Park. Measuring an impressive 282 feet below sea level at Badwater Basin, this is also the lowest point in all of North America. It's an endorheic drainage basin of the surrounding desert, which basically means the area's water ends up here instead of eventually flowing to the ocean. This area is absolutely fascinating and extreme, not only for its low elevation, but also its high temperatures. Some of the highest temperatures anywhere on Earth have been measured in Death Valley just north of the low point. But what I think is the most jaw-dropping fact is that the lowest point in the entire country is only 85 miles away from the highest point of the entire contiguous US. That would be Mount Whitney, which soars to an elevation of 14,505 feet. This stark contrast creates an almost unreal variety of landscapes in such a small area. With soaring mountains and deep valleys, lush forests, and arid deserts, this region of California is one of Earth's greatest natural wonders. So there we have it, those are the lowest points of all 50 US states. Thank you all so much once again for watching this video. I love making videos like this, so I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know any thoughts or reactions you have in the comments down below, and once again, if you've been to any of these low points, leave a comment with your stories below as well. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for videos like this one every other week, and thanks so much again.